Welcome to the Arithmetic Zone and Merry Christmas, everyone. Today we are finally up to that point. We're going to learn about document object model and we're going to combine all of our knowledge with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So as you can see, I'm back in my CS folder and I actually added some folders within the CS folder just to separate the different things we've done. In the cars folder, we have all of our HTML and CSS files and the image files that we used in the beginning of the Introduction to Web Design series. In the basic JS folder, I just have introduction.js, where I basically went through all of the simple JavaScript lessons. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another folder. We're going to call it DOM, based on document object model. And within this folder, we're going to make 3 files. We're going to make an HTML file. I'll call it index.html. A CSS file, we'll call it style.css. I'll put that in the, make sure it's in the DOM folder. And we just, a JS file, we'll call it script.js. So we now have our HTML, CS, and JavaScript files in the HTML file. If you don't remember how to make the basic template for a web page, you just put an exclamation mark and then press T. Then what you want to do is underneath right here, write link rel equals style sheet. Make sure you spell it like that. Then href equals our CSS file name, style.css. We do this so we link our HTML and CSS files together. And just to test that it works, let's make the background color of the body red. Make sure you have that semicolon and make sure you save. Then we're going to use our live server extension, which if that appears, just dispose of it and then press go live again. Go in our DOM folder because that's where everything is. And the whole page is red, so we know that the HTML and CSS is linked together. So I'm going to get rid of this because we don't want that. And just to start everything off in the body, I'm going to have a whole bunch of, let's have just one H1, a couple of H2s, like 3 of them, and then introducing a new tag that we haven't covered before, the button tag. And let's say click me. Let's save and then observe the result. So alright, it has a click me button. If I click on it, it does nothing. Why? Because I didn't code anything for it to happen. The reason why I did not go over the button tag before is because we won't be able to do anything without it using JavaScript. So I just released a 5-part tutorial on basic JavaScript that gives us about enough knowledge to do some cool things with this button. But before we can do that, we need to link the HTML and JavaScript files together. You would think it would be a similar format to this link rel tag, but it's a little different. One way to link them together is to put the link in the end of the HTML file, specifically at the end of the body. So we're not going to write link, we're actually going to write script, and then write src equals the JavaScript file name, script.js, and then close it off. This one does have a closing tag. So just to make sure it works, let's write console.log hello in the JavaScript file, and if we check back at our web page and we press inspect element, let's get off of this iPhone SE display and just go back to the regular one. So just press that. If we look in the console, it says hello. If I refresh the page, it still says hello. So we know that it works properly. Now you won't realize it until later, but the reason why I put this at the bottom is because HTML files run from top to bottom. So if I were to have this alongside the link rel within the head, what it would do, it would load the JavaScript file before the HTML file. And that's bad because in the JavaScript file, we're going to be linking with HTML objects. Now, obviously, all I did in the JavaScript file so far is just console.log. So this will work regardless. But if you were to have it in the top, in order for these tags to load before the JavaScript file, you would write the word defer right here to negate this issue. That way, the HTML will load first, and then the JavaScript, whatever elements we refer to in that file from the HTML page, it's going to know what we're talking about. So that's a pretty difficult concept to understand, but later on you'll see what I mean when I show it in practice. First thing I want to do now with our linked JavaScript file, so I just want to show you a cool little method. It's called alert. You can write any message, say wake up. Let's save. And now it gives me this alert, wake up. And every time I reload the page, it'll give me this alert. Now that's pretty annoying, so I'm just gonna go comment that off right now, just so we don't have to deal with that. Now that that's done and over with, we're finally gonna get into the good stuff. So how do we refer to all these different HTML elements in our JavaScript file? Well, we're using variables, of course. So how would I refer to this h1 tag right here? I'd use a command called querySelector. So and then let's give our variable name. Let's call it h1 element equals, and we're going to write document first the HTML, then write querySelector, which is a method, and then we're going to have the parentheses because it is a method, and then the parameter for this method would be the HTML tag, so it's h1. So what we just did, so let me just console.log h1 element. What we just did with this querySelector is that we are retrieving from the HTML document the first instance of h1, which would be this one. So if I were to print it out in the console, you can see this h1 tag. It shows you all these different properties. You don't have to worry about that. But let's say I were to write something in them. Say, I don't know, ABC, save. And then you can see the whole opening, closing tag, and the inner text. Pretty cool. So essentially, we retrieved this whole HTML element using querySelector. It retrieves the first instance. So what can we do with this h1 element? Well, we can manipulate pretty much everything about it. We can manipulate the text. So I just got rid of the text. What I can do is h1 element dot inner HTML to refer to the text, and then in quotes, because it text is a string, let's say hello world. Save, and you see hello world in our web page, even though in our HTML document I didn't write anything, but in our JavaScript I did. And there's more things we can do. You know how with our CSS we can change how it looks? You can actually do it in our JavaScript file as well. So h1 element dot style to refer to the how it looks, style, and then let's say font size equals, say 200px. Save, and now it's much bigger. We just changed the style of it. I can change the color of it as well. h1 element dot style dot color, say red. Save, now it's in red. I can change the background color as well. h1 element dot style dot background color equals blue. It's gonna look pretty bad, but look at that, got it to work. So in a way, we can pretty much do anything we want in our CSS file. We can do it in our JavaScript file. Now you might be wondering, why would you want to use CSS if you can just do this? Well, this is pretty inefficient. I mean, look how much writing this is, when in our CSS file we can accomplish the same thing by just writing this in a much more clean and concise manner. I can just comment all that out and it would be the same thing. So especially in large documents, CSS would ultimately be way better. Everything's much more simple. So yeah, I'm just gonna comment all that out. Now what if I want to refer to the same type of HTML element, but I want to have multiple? Because guess what, if I add another h1, let's say I write y, I don't know, guess what, if I try to do that, if I comment all this out, oh whoops, I went in the wrong file. If I try to comment all that out, then I'm just gonna get rid of all this CSS. If you look back, only the hello world is affected, the y is not affected, even though they both share the h1 tag when I specified right here. So why did that happen? Well, remember, the querySelector method only returns the first instance of that HTML element in C. So this H1 comes first. It's going to return that one. It's going to return this line. It's not going to return this one. But what if I want it to return multiple of the same line? I have all these different H2 tags that I want to change. Well, that's where querySelectorAll comes in. So let's say let H2 elements goes document.querySelectorAll and then H2. Now, if I want to have the inner HTML, what I would do is H2 elements dot inner HTML. Let's say cool. Now you would expect that all the H2s, you would see all the H2s say cool. But if you go back to our web page, that is not the case. Why does this happen? Well, when we use the command querySelectorAll, we return all of these H2 tags, not just the first one. In a way, that is a list of items. H2 elements is not just any variable, it's actually a list. And when we do .inner HTML on a list, it's not going to work. So what are we going to have to do in a list? We have to access each individual element. And how did we do that before? We used a for loop. So for let I equals 0, I is less than H2 elements dot length, and then I plus plus. We're going to remove this in here, and then we have to specify the index I with the brackets. So for every element in H2 elements, it's going to make the inner HTML say cool. We go back, and now it says cool, cool, cool. So we got that out of the way. Now querySelector isn't the only command we could use. If you want to specifically refer to an ID, so let's give this one an ID of blue. If we want to refer to IDs, we would use another method. Let me just get it prepared. Document.getElementById. And then you would write the ID name blue, not like that. And then blue element dot style dot color equals blue. Save. Now that last H2 element where I put the ID on is blue. Now, interesting thing, you do not have to actually use getElementById even if you want to refer to this ID. You could still use querySelector, but if you're using querySelector, you would need to put that hashtag, just like in that CSS file. Every time we refer to the ID, this is identical in function to what we just did. So it still says cool and blue. So let's put it back to getElementById without the hashtag. Likewise, if I wanted to access the HTML elements by class name, well, first let me just make another HTML element and give it a class of purple. Let's say purple is cool. I'm gonna save, and I'll give purple is really cool. I'll have it right here as well with the class name of purple. If you remember, you use classes usually to refer to a specific group of elements, while ID is just one specific element. So let purple elements equal document, and then we're gonna say getElementsByClassName. Again, note the plural. We're gonna have to write purple, and then because this is a group of elements, we're gonna again have to use that for loop. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this, and then change the name. So purple elements, and then also what it's gonna do, style.color equals purple. Get rid of that exclamation mark. We're gonna save, and we're gonna see that both this element and this element are purple, so we know that it works. And again, instead of using getElementsByClassName, you can use querySelectorAll, but you would have to use a dot to specifically refer to the class. If you were to do that, it would still work if you were to do that. So that concludes selecting elements using all these methods, but there's still something we have to do. If we go back to our web page, we added this button in the beginning, and it still doesn't do anything. How can I select this button using our knowledge? Well, again, we're going to declare a new variable, let button element equals document dot querySelector, not querySelectorAll, querySelector, and then button, because there's only a single button in our HTML page. So just to know that it works, let's just give it a little style and make the background color purple. We save, we now have a purple button. It's a little hard to see. So in our CSS file, we're actually gonna change the button here because it's much faster here. Can make it purple here, make the color white, not wheat, white. Padding 10px, border radius of 10px. We save, we don't need this anymore. Save and look at our result. It looks much better. But we want to do something with this element. How would I make it so that when you click on this button, it would do something? We're going to use something called an event listener. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a function. We're going to call it onClick. You can call it whatever you want, but let's give it an appropriate name. And now we're going to refer to our element, button element, dot add event listener. So what this does, this is a special method, special built-in method that adds in events for when you interact with HTML elements. So we want to click on this. So there's two parameters for this. First one would be click, and the second one would be our method name onClick. So it can be a little hard to understand, but with this method, we're saying when you click on the whatever this HTML element is, which is this button, whenever you click on that, it's gonna call this function onClick. So now, just to know that it works, let's make document.body.style.background color red. So what we did in the beginning, just to know that it works. It's not going to do anything at first, but when you click on this, let me just close this. The background color is now red. So we know that it works. Now, in this function, we could use any of our JavaScript knowledge. We can use selections. So let's say if document dot, let me just copy and paste that. If the body background color is red, so we got to use double equal signs, not the equal signs. Let's set it to yellow. And don't forget our braces, curly braces. Else document.body, can't type today, not style, that background color equals red. So what this is saying, every time you click on it, if the background color is red, it's going to make it yellow. But if it's not red, then it's going to make it red. So we go back to our web page, we click on this, it's red. Click on it again, it turns it into yellow because it already was red. Now it's not red, so you click on it again, it turns back to red. So it alternates in color. So we just used our JavaScript knowledge of selections to make a working button on our HTML web page. And this is the true heart of JavaScript. JavaScript is taking in information from the HTML page or from other sources, and it's giving the HTML elements a functionality, the most common one being the clicking function. Anyway, that's a basic introduction to DOM, Document Object Model. We'll see you guys next time, and I hope you guys have a happy holidays. See you then.